In the Fortress of Lost Steel, giant robots observe and declare that intruders must be eliminated. They are the ancient titans, creatures of epic level. The knight warns that these titans have already killed 5 S-level groups, and the mage states she doesn't have much to do as they are 80% immune to her magic. The elf, heavily protected in combat, voices her discontent at being there, and the last girl remarks that it's too big, there's no way. However, the hooded figure snaps his fingers and advises against panicking. A golden pentagram appears above the titans. The mage is impressed that with this simple gesture, he created a disaster-level circle. Gold coins begin to rain from the pentagram. The titans reach towards the sky, wondering why they're no longer attacking. The blonde girl explains that last month he spent 5,000 gold coins to buy a book, and found information that the titans worship the golden element. So as long as you have enough, you can distract them. However, the elf points out that the water beneath their feet is corrosive, so he's losing all that money. The blonde girl reassures not to worry, it must be just 1% of what the boss has, and he never enters a deal where he loses. The hooded figure remarks that Emma talks too much and covers her mouth. He then removes the cloak covering everything. His weapon is the demon Annihilator, a legendary 12 that costs 270 billion, along with the Conqueror's gloves and the Abyssal Eye armor, a total of 940 billion just in equipment. Inside the armor, he smiles, saying with money you can really do whatever you want. But all of this was the result of his work, because at this moment Emma is walking through the city, exhausted. She finally found the source of benevolence, which is the perfect place to perform the hero's summoning. She is one of the sacred guides of the Order of Destiny. Emptying her bag, she only needs to grab a few items to start the ritual. The golden fragment from an angel's horn she spent a year hunting. Desiccated tears from a dying dragon she spent 2 years hunting. And the most difficult of all, which took 3 years to find, a complete skull of an altruistic victim. Finally, she can begin the summoning. She asks that the great hero of benevolence come and save this world. At that same moment, but in another world, in the G Group department, the blue-haired girl says that all the companies are doing very well, and at this moment, he is already the second richest in this world. With a glass in his hand, he says that's not enough, they have to devour all the competition. He is Gao Yi, the second richest man in the world with 437 billion. The girl whispers in his ear that he's been working so hard for 4 consecutive months. Leaning into his lap, she suggests maybe tonight. Gao Yi looks at her and asks if she has finished the work. She says not yet, there are a few things to do. He then asks if he's paying her 3 million a year to be an escort. He tells her to get the documents and finish all of this today. She agrees and leaves thinking this guy is no good, he only thinks about money. From the top of the building, Gao Yi embraces the city. In a world where money is the most important thing, he wants to be the most powerful person. However, suddenly he traveled and now he's in another place, naked on a fountain. He doesn't understand what happened and everyone thinks he's a pervert showing off. Someone calls him the great hero. It's Emma with tears in her eyes saying she really managed to summon him, she's so happy. Gao Yi grabs her and runs away. He throws her against the wall. He wants to know who she is, where this place is, and why he appeared here out of nowhere. She tells him to step back a little and put on some clothes first. He says he earns 300,000 per second, so he's already lost a lot of money here. She better explain everything as quickly as possible. Emma asks if she only has 5 seconds and he's already spoken one. She explains that the lords of the future predicted that their world is about to be destroyed and 5 heroes will be summoned. The heroes of benevolence, justice, property, knowledge, and trust. Smiling, she says they will embark on this adventure together, but he refuses. She wants to know why he's the destined hero. Gao Yi says he was about to become the richest man in the world, so he doesn't have time for this little game here. Emma apologizes, but unfortunately, he can't go. He can only come. Gao Yi, resembling Levi Ackerman from Attack on Titan, looks incredulous. In another instant, he's already with arms wide open, ready to end it all. Emma pleads with him not to do it. Suddenly, his stomach growls. Emma reaches into her pocket and hands him a little bread roll, telling him not to give up. He remembers his sister once saying something similar. He lowers his head and admits he's someone who also started from scratch, but it's been a while since he faced any difficulties. He takes her bread and says that time is money, so while he eats, she better explain a bit about this hero world to him. He takes a bite of the bread and lets out a yell, asking if this thing she gave him is a stone. She says no, these rolls are like that, you have to lick them before you can eat. He complains it's even worse now, there's nothing to eat. Emma tearfully explains that it's actually all she has. She waited several days just to give it to him. Gao Yi asks calmly, haven't you eaten in 5 days? She calmly admits she hasn't. He asks if she's so poor she can't even buy food. With pride, she says she is. Gao Yi finds it strange and asks if her religious group doesn't provide anything. She finds it odd and asks why they should pay for anything. Gao Yi says it's weird. She's tasked with summoning the hero who will save the world and doesn't get anything from her sect. She explains that her mission is to save the world and not worry about money. It's much more than just a job she does. He pushes her against the wall, thinking there's a lot wrong in this world. He asks if he was summoned to work for free and won't even get food or clothes. However, he's pondering if it's true that if he doesn't help their world, it will be destroyed. She says he doesn't need to worry. She prepared an exclusive and sacred weapon just for him. Tada, she shows the weapon and says it's very powerful. She tries to hand it to him, saying it's very strong and he can touch it. Gao Yi asks what her sect will provide since they can't even provide food and clothes. Looking at the blade, Gao Yi says the golden elements of this sword flow through the black handle like a dragon in dark clouds. He raises the sword, saying this really seems to be a treasure among treasures. And Emma, confident, says that if he helps 100 people altruistically, he will receive recognition from this sword. Gao Yi asks since he's the hero and he's the owner of this sword, right? And she says yes. With that, she becomes confident, saying there's always a way to win a guy over with an incredible weapon. However, he already attacked her in front of an old man and asked how much he would pay for that sword there. Emma grabbed his arm, asking what he was doing. Gao Yi said he's the owner of the sword, so he'll sell it, because nowadays money is much more important than a sword. Emma cries, saying he can't sell that sword.
No.
It has over 100 years of history and is a legendary weapon. Gao Yi is surprised now he understands it truly is a legendary weapon. She gives him a stern look, saying yes, he has to understand that it's important. Gao Yi rushes to the vendor and asks if he heard he has to evaluate it very carefully. Looking at the sword, the vendor realizes it's quite sophisticated and would be worth more than 500 gold coins. But seeing the protagonist's appearance, he's sure he stole it from someone. And unfortunately, he'll have to take advantage of the boy. So he says the sword looks good, but its texture is strange and the gold coating was made with metal, which devalues it. Before the vendor finishes his offer, Gao Yi is already leaving the shop with Emma. She asks if he understood he can't sell it, and he replies that no, it's just that he found a swindler. Staring at the vendor, he says that when negotiating with experienced people, you can't use an ordinary method. The desperate vendor says they need to negotiate a little more. Exactly what Gao Yi wanted, because that's the best strategy to start a negotiation with someone you don't know. Bringing tea and biscuits, the vendor apologizes, saying he imagines the price he mentioned was much lower than he thought. Emma sees the biscuits and starts drooling there, looking like she ate a bucket of paint. The vendor asks Gao Yi his name. However, he replies that he doesn't waste time with unprofessional people, so it's better to call the store manager right away. The vendor feels a bit embarrassed, wondering how he knows that but leaves saying he'll call. Gao Yi notices something. Emma is drooling but not eating anything. She hands him the biscuits and says he can eat them all. She'll just eat that drooled bread. He asks if she doesn't want to eat because she thinks these rolls were bought with the sword, and she, as the sacred guide, would feel guilty. Emma is crying, asking if they really need to sell the sacred sword. The resplendent Gao Yi tells her that she must think all he cares about is money. But as a brave man, sometimes you have to formulate plans and take actions that go against the rules. She becomes emotional hearing this, and he says that selling the sword is just a temporary measure because soon he will get it back. Holding hands, he tells her he can't continue alone and needs her to believe in him. Will she trust him? Emma hands over her hands, saying she will indeed trust him. He turns away, saying it's settled. He turns to Emma and warns that when the store owner arrives, she will have to follow his plan. The door begins to open and Gao Yi is sure an old man will come, the type of person he likes to negotiate with the most. But what appears is a girl with rabbit ears. Embarrassed, she asks if she really has to negotiate the price. Gao Yi spits out the coffee. He asks the guys if they're sure the store owner is a rabbit girl. Emma jumps towards her and pets her ear, causing extreme pain. Gao Yi pulls her away, saying that's rude. The rabbit relaxes, thinking at least this human seems normal. Gao Yi tells her she has to learn from him and that's how it's done. He approaches her and asks if this lovely girl would let him scratch her ears. The rabbit realizes she's even worse. Sometime later, Gao Yi apologizes, saying it was just a joke. But before they start the negotiation, he will introduce himself. His name is Gordon G, and he is the son of a noble from a distant land. His father was a rich and cruel person who enslaved many people. When his father died, he also fell into a life of luxury and pleasures, but he managed to meet the saintly soul that illuminated his life, Miss Emma. With that, he realized that money was something external to the body and only by practicing kindness could he obtain true salvation in this life. He points to Emma, saying it was she who introduced him and made him know the kindness of this world. The vendor seems to notice something strange and asks if he wants to sell the sword to feed the poor. Gao Yi says that's exactly the case. He wants to help the poor people of the city he saw on his way here. The rabbit starts crying, saying he's so amazing and introduces herself as Iwasaji Dokaka. Gao Yi hands over the sword, asking Miss Dokaka to please take a look. This here is a family heirloom. She then takes it in her hands, sniffs it, the ear perks up. She takes a bite, the ear perks up again. Gao Yi is thinking that at the very least she'll have to pay 1,000 for the psychological pressure he exerted, and Dokaka says they'll pay 5,000 for this sword. Gao Yi is excited because with the calculations he made of the monthly expenses of people in this city, it's enough to feed them for 2 lifetimes. The vendor tells her that he only has 5,300 coins in the entire store, but Dokaka tells him to trust her. Sweating, the vendor says that if she spends all the coins, that person may come to bother them. While Gao Yi thinks that now that they've exposed themselves, he'll have to raise the price. He says he thought Miss Dokaka would be kind to him and give a good price, but it wasn't the case. The old man tells him to stop lying. Her race can detect any value of metal. Gao Yi says the Nio sword is much more than just metal. In fact, its most important aspect is the sacred power it contains, and therefore it's worth at least 20,000 coins. Even Emma is startled, and the vendor says he's insane. He'll kick him out of the store. However, Dokaka has already made the contract and is handing him the 20,000 coins. Gao Yi is now worried because of her expression. He underestimated the value of the sword, but now it's risky to increase it and leave with nothing. Not to mention, he heard from the people in the city that there's no other nearby store, so if he can't sell here, he may not negotiate anywhere else. Considering all the variables, finalizing this negotiation is the best alternative. He stands up, saying that the store owner apparently shares the same desire to save the poor, and he thanks her on behalf of all the people who suffer in this world. With that, he leaves with a bag of gold coins. Inside a mansion, Emma asks if they're really going to live there. It seems very expensive. In the middle of the hall, Gao Yi shouts that a hotel this big has no decent service. The girl says this hotel is the most luxurious within 1,000 miles, and they don't seem suitable to be there. 2 giant masked beefcakes appear, and she asks for them to be thrown out. Gao Yi says he was trying to communicate as an ordinary person, but he was mistaken. He opens his arms, saying enough pretending, it's time to lay the cards on the table. Suddenly, a bunch of people start entering the place. They surround Emma with a bunch of clothes, and 2 fitting rooms are brought up. The hotel staff doesn't understand what he's doing. An hour later, the curtain falls. Gao Yi and Emma are in new clothes, and the store owner is shocked. That's a customized service. Obviously, Emma's clothes are the least revealing ever seen in the world, while Gao Yi now wears a suit full of gold detailing. The vendor is impressed because to get this kind of customized service, you have to spend a lot of money. As far as she knows, there's only one person in the city who should be capable of that. Gao Yi tells the guy he'll give an extra beyond the 2,500 gold coins since he liked it a lot, and the vendor says if he needs anything, just let them know, and they'll be there right away. With that, he says everything's all right. The store girl now clings to his arm, saying her vision is a little blurry. She just hopes he's not angry. Gao Yi tells her to stop nonsense and just show him the best room and food they have in this place. She says okay and will take him. Gao Yi turns and asks Emma why she's not coming. The poor thing can't believe they spent 2,500 gold coins on 2 pieces of cloth. They then go to the most luxurious room of all, and Emma touches everything, saying it's very soft. She throws herself on the bed impressed, saying it doesn't even feel like she's on a bed. It feels like she's in the clouds. Sitting on the bed, Gao Yi says the quality of it is ridiculous and wants to know where she slept before. She closes her eyes and remembers she slept on the pig, slept on the ox, slept in the pigsty with the chickens, and tells him that when you're unlucky, you sleep wherever you can. The good part about sleeping on the streets is that when you put your hands to the sky, you can see the stars. Gao Yi is speechless and remembers a time when he tried to give his clothes to his sister who said she didn't need them. That day, he promised her that he would make a lot of money and build an incredible mansion just for them. She replied that she was afraid the mansion would be so big that it would be hard for them to see each other. Emma says he seems very different from a kindness hero, but she's sure he's a good person. Gao Yi laughs. For him, kindness is useless. Protecting the people you care about or saving the world, there's only one efficient way to do it, and it's with gold. Sometime later, they had a feast. Emma is drooling but saying it was a waste to use the sword just for that. Gao Yi tells her not to worry, everything is going according to the plan to save this world. Gao Yi remembers that both Dokaka and the hotel woman mentioned a Tao Lord who seems to be inaccessible to civilians. That's why he needs to maintain the image of a noble to enter aristocratic events. But he knows it would be very risky for him to make a move. So the best course of action is to do something that would make this Tao Lord want to contact him. He then tells Emma that he's going to bed and tomorrow they'll go buy some things. When he looks at her, her belly is huge from eating so much. Meanwhile, in Momboni Castle, someone is eating while another person is sweating on the ground. This is Count Murtaugh, and he's telling the guy that he's been on the ground for too long because he hasn't grabbed a piece. The mustached gentleman apologizes, saying he tried to collect the maximum tax, but the people have no money at all. The Count asks if he's going to keep making him wait. The guy apologizes, saying that's not the case, and takes a bite of the meat. The Count stands up and says that this is buffalo meat that was aged for 30 months. Was it delicious? The guy replies that yes, it was very tender. He's never eaten anything so tender in his life. Suddenly, the Count snaps his fingers and 4 girls carrying lots of meat appear. The mustached guy says the meat is very good, but doesn't think he can eat all of that. The Count warns that when he appointed him mayor of the city, he had sworn to do everything he wanted, but he didn't keep his promise. The mayor's feet are tied to the chair. The Count warns him that he has 15 minutes to eat all of that. The floor around the table opens up and several crocodiles are down there. If the mayor doesn't eat in that time, he and the crocodiles will eat everything in him too. He starts eating immediately, desperate, while the mayor just watches. The count says this guy can't even collect 2,000 gold, but the worst is this other guy. The Kaka is chained up, begging to be released. She says that sword she bought is very powerful. He doesn't understand. The count observes the sword and thinks about the protagonist's fake name and then tells someone to check who this Gordon guy is. He grabs the Kaka's ear and warns her that nobles are fierce people. Back with the protagonist and Emma, he's telling her to be obedient and stay as she came into the world. She replies she's not really into that. Gao Yi says she said she would help him with anything necessary. She says she agrees with any request from him except that one. She's not into doing slimy things, but he grabs her arms, saying she has no choice. He kicks her and throws her in the water, saying he can't stand her smell anymore. She's desperate and begging to be saved, saying she'll drown. Until when she stands up, she realizes it's actually quite shallow and starts bubbling like a fool. Gao Yi, observing her, says she's acting like his sister did when they first entered the mansion. Suddenly, something touches her thigh. She jumps frantically into his face. He pulls her out, telling her to stop making things up. There's no way a snake can survive in hot water. But when he sees, there really is something in the water. Suddenly, the hotel girl appears and tells her that's not a snake. In fact, its name is Fire, a type of creature from Purgatory with a body in flames. As long as you keep 5 of them in the pool, it stays warm. But Emma doesn't need to worry because they're not aggressive or toxic at all. Gao Yi thinks that if he took this back to his world, he could open a perfect sauna place. He then tells Emma that he has something to discuss with the owner and tells her to finish her bath. The hotel girl serves him wine, asking what he wants to discuss with her. She's happy that finally a noble with a bit of money has shown up and she's going to have to finish him off. First, she'll ensure he becomes obsessed, and then she'll take all the treasure he has. When he goes to get the wine, she taps the glass, saying it's time to make things fun. The wine spills on her, and she's embarrassed. Gao Yi starts blushing and drooling, and she already imagines he's going to do some really hot and slimy things with her. But in reality, he grabbed the glass the moment she tried to spill it. He warns her to be careful. If she had gotten wet, she'd have to change clothes and time is money. She awkwardly says he really is very agile. In fact, this is the skill Gao Yi developed because most of the time when he goes out with girls, strange things happen. He then asks her what he can call her. She thinks she'll have to win him over little by little and introduces herself as Bigon. Gao Yi asks her to explain in detail about that city. She says they're on the far right of the map and are surrounded by a swamp full of crocodiles and creatures. That's why the gold coins are called crocodile coins. He then asks what else the city is known for. She mentions they're also famous because of their rice. It's a little larger and a little sweeter than all the others, a type of food that only nobles enjoy. Gao Yi asks why only nobles. She explains that 20% is sold to royalty and the rest is sold only to the rich. He then wants to know what ordinary people usually eat. She says most people eat some cheap grains imported from other smaller cities, but they're so poor that people are just eating leftover rice. She says this city is sick and broken. Gao Yi questions, saying if everything's so bad, why does she have a luxury hotel here? He leans close to her ear, asking if she has such incredible administrative skills. She says it's nothing amazing. The reason she opened here is because it's close to Purgatory. He asks if Purgatory is where that creature she showed comes from. She says yes, but the true magical creature isn't that beast. The strongest monster of the fire element lives in that area, the dragon bird of melted feathers, that lives inside a lake with lava over 1,000 degrees, and each of its feathers contains immense magical power. Gao Yi understands, apparently this item is rare and the only people who have money to buy it are the rich. That's why she opened a hotel right here. She says it's almost like that, but there are 2 types of people who choose to stay here. The first is the group of mercenaries supported by the royal family and are extremely generous. The second group is high-level adventurers sponsored by the nobles. However, even the best mercenaries and adventurers struggle to get a single feather. And now our hotel is accumulating a lot of debt and will soon be handed over to that lord. Gao Yi is curious about this lord and asks her to tell him a bit about him. She says there's not much to say. He's a lord who lives around there. He gets up, saying he needs to leave because it's very late and they'll see each other later. Before leaving, she gives a warning. It's good for him to avoid talking as much as possible about this lord or trying to find out anything about him, or he'll end up dead. Gao Yi says he'll take her advice to heart, and with that, she leaves. But he says this is perfect. From the gold rush to the Industrial Revolution, the more dangerous something is, the more profit you can make. Money always accompanies danger, but as a precaution, he'll have to take some actions. Then he goes and asks Emily if she's finished bathing, who passed out in the pool after so long. He goes back to the room and gives her something to drink. That was just an excuse for the artist to do that. Not that I'm complaining, quite the opposite, right, Arigato? Gao Yi asks about the skills she mentioned when he showed up. She gets emotional, saying he's finally starting to care about his power. She prepares to explain. First of all, in the teachings that were recorded, 5 heroes were brought to this world: benevolence, justice, property, knowledge, and trust. She tosses a book up, saying each of these brave heroes has a guiding book. As he completes each of the experiences described in the book, he will awaken more and more powers. Gao Yi then asks what abilities he has. However, she explains she doesn't know many details. He yells at her face, saying she's the saint who was supposed to guide him and knows nothing. She explains that the only thing in the book is that he has to save 100 people going through difficulties to gain abilities, and she doesn't know anything else. He says to just look at the last page to see if there's anything there. He tries to open it, but nothing happens. She explains that this is a book sealed by sacred magic, and he has to complete each chapter to open it. He realizes they'll somehow have to retrieve that sword, but this mission to save 100 people doesn't seem very interesting to a capitalist like him. All he wants is to accumulate as much money as possible and continue to make money appreciate. So why was he summoned as a hero of benevolence? Emma touches his shoulder, saying it's okay. Even though she doesn't have his abilities, she has healing abilities and the ability of contract. Gao Yi thinks about it, contract and healing. He then asks her if she can use them on other people and objects. She says yes. He then asks if her contract can summon any item. She says yes, and the items can be stored in a consciousness portal. He asks what that consciousness thing is. She explains it's like a warehouse that doesn't exist. He can store anything in this place. He asks how many things he can store. She says it depends on the power contained in the object used by contract. If he uses a sacred weapon to do something like this, he could store anything in the sea. He then asks, and if he makes a contract with a gold coin, how much can he store? She explains that it's almost unlimited because gold coins don't possess mana, which means he can store as much as he wants. Excited, he takes her hand and tells her to make a contract now. She asks if he's sure. The Sea of Consciousness is very precious. Is he going to use it to store money? He explains to her that this money will buy the sword that will save the world, so it's very important. She says she understands then. She picks up a blade that's beside her, points it at him, and says it's time to begin. He wants to know what that is. She says he just needs to shed a little blood to form the contract, and places the giant bag of coins under 2 giant things. She warns him to start shedding blood on the coins. He asks if she really wants him to put his blood on 2,000 coins, and she says yes. He asks if she's sure she knows how to heal, and she says she does. He is relieved, but she explains she can only regenerate hemoglobin and not produce blood, so if he loses too much, he will die anyway. He asks if there's any kind of potion to replenish the blood. She says yes, but they're extremely expensive, so they probably won't sell them in this isolated town. He thinks about that then. How is he going to put blood on all these coins? Suddenly, he says he found an efficient way. He fills a bucket with that water, throws all the coins, makes a little cut on his hand, and spills all the blood. He turns to her and tells her to activate the contract now, but she's a little dizzy, saying she gets sick seeing blood, and faints. He wraps his hand there and rescues the warrior. Now it's going to be complicated. He tries to wake her up with some taps on the face, but she doesn't get up, and he realizes she's having apnea and can't breathe. Because of that, there's only one thing to do. He puts his hand on her chin and sends oxygen into her. She opens her eyes slowly and blushes when she sees him there so close. Tired, he says she finally woke up, so she should stop the bleeding quickly. She pushes him, saying the hero can't be like that. The teachings she learned forbid her from doing this kind of thing to the hero. He points to his hand, saying he doesn't care about doing this kind of thing, but she should stop the bleeding quickly. He then stretches his hand on the table, and she uses a healing magic that closes the wound. Seeing that, he's thinking that if he could take this girl back to Earth, he would make a lot of money. It seems that somehow he'll have to persuade her. He turns to her and says it's time to move to the second part of the plan and sign this contract. But now she's all confident after helping him. So she starts an incantation to create the Sea of Consciousness. A magic circle appears under the coins, and Gao Yi feels something is coming toward him. Suddenly, when he closes his eyes, he finds himself in the hand of the goddess of abundance, which really is too much wealth for one goddess. Looking at the hand, he says he feels like he can perceive the existence of each of the coins. Emma asks if he's okay, to which he responds that he's never been better. In the original world, even though he had a lot of money, it was nothing more than digits on a screen. But the coins here are like flesh and blood in his body. He says he takes back everything he said about this world. This place is amazing. The next day, he tells Emma to wake up. Obviously, the artist had a lot of work. Looking at her, he says she looks like a pig sleeping. Apparently, I'll have to use that trick. He picks up some food and puts it near her nose, but she ends up biting him. She asks what they're going to do today while he has swollen hands. He's thinking of going out to buy some equipment and medicine since he received warnings from the hotel woman. Emma says she seems like a good woman, but Gao Yi knows that for her to be able to keep this hotel in a place with so many poor people, she's not good. Then they go to a potion shop, and Gao Yi asks the vendor if he has a blood-restoring potion. The vendor says it's a coincidence because he just received top-quality potions. He says he'll get them and thinks that from the boy's clothes, he must like to spend a lot of money. The guy then shows a pack of 3 and says it costs 5 gold coins. Gao Yi says it's really not very expensive. The vendor says it really isn't expensive and is an essential medicine for travelers. Since he's the first customer, he's going to make 30 bottles of it for 45 coins. Gao Yi is smiling and says that if they really are high-quality potions, it's very cheap. But what if they're not? Sweating, the vendor asks what he means by that. Gao Yi says he knows that the production method is extremely complicated. He then pours the contents of the guy's bottle into his. The better the potion, the stronger the red, which is why the guy was using containers that already have a reddish tint. In addition, expired potions give off a very strong smell, but he noticed there's incense right here on the counter. This means that the potions he's trying to sell have none of the effect. He grabs him by the collar, asking how he dares to sell this kind of trash. Sweating, the vendor asks how the nobleman knows so much about medicine. Obviously, before going there, Gao Yi asked everything to Emma and the hotel girl, and tells the guy that whether buying or selling, you always have to know everything about the product. He lets the vendor go and warns that if the king's mercenaries or the high-ranking adventurers find out they've been deceived, they'll probably come here seeking revenge. The vendor begs him not to do this, saying he hasn't been able to pay the fees of this place for the last 2 months. At this rate, he'll end up being killed. Kneeling, he begs for his life. But Gao Yi says that if he brings something worthwhile, he'll give him the 30 gold coins. If not, he can say goodbye to his life. The vendor says it's okay, he understands, and he'll get the good stuff. And he then brings some new potions, saying all of these are genuine and of very high quality. Gao Yi says it's okay then, he'll pay the price he mentioned. The vendor warns that these potions are worth at least 120 coins, not the 30 he mentioned. Gao Yi then threatens him, saying he'll call the adventurers here to demand the price. The vendor gets scared, not knowing what to say, and says it's okay, he can take them, no need to worry. Gao Yi thanks him and says he'll also take the fake potions to prevent him from selling this kind of garbage to others. Emma gets excited, saying he's really a very kind man. She goes to the vendor and tells him he can't lie to people while Gao Yi leaves with everything from the store. With that, he went to an armor shop and repeated the process. The guy wanted to take his own life when he left. He also went to a general items shop and bought a few more things. Emma is curious why everyone sells so cheaply to him after they talk a little. She sees Gao Yi crying and asks him why he's crying and if he's not happy. Gao Yi says he's crying because the guys negotiate in such a primitive way and even their tricks are ridiculous. Emma says she doesn't understand what he's talking about, but she'll cry too. Gao Yi explains that he's in a position of much more power than these guys, and the only thing he feels for them is pity. Maybe this is the feeling of the loneliness of a god. Sometime later, he's walking with Emma in the city, realizing that the Count's actions are really leading everyone into poverty. Suddenly, Emma alerts that something is happening. They go to take a look, and a knight is restraining someone on the ground. With a bag in hand, the knight asks how he dared to buy private food. He approaches and warns that in this city, you can only buy food from authorized places. However, the blonde person replies that it's impossible since the prices at authorized places are exorbitant. The knight says if that's the case, he has to starve to death since he can't buy food anywhere else. Emma tells the protagonist that they have to go there and beat up that guard, but he tells her to calm down. Emma turns with tears in her eyes, saying that if they don't help that child, her arm will be cut off. Gao Yi tells her to be quiet and that there's only one way to save that person without getting into trouble. She asks how she can help. He tells her to go back to the hotel and bring something for him. The knight announces to everyone that that person will suffer for buying illegal food. It's good for those present to realize what happens to those who do this. He then signals for execution, and a knight raises an axe to cut the arm. Suddenly, someone shouts to wait. The knight turns, asking who told him to wait. The carriage stops with Emma and the muscle guys. Gao Yi gets out of it. The knights ask who this person is and how he has the courage to stop the execution. Gao Yi says he's too lazy to explain and asks Emma to introduce him. Emma then tells everyone that he's Baron Gordon and he liked that person very much, so he wants to take him. But the boy says he'd rather have his arm cut off than become a noble's plaything. But Gao Yi slaps him across the face. Wiping his hand, he warns, no one can refuse to become one of his items. The knight is stunned. He doesn't know where this city of Tangshan is, but seeing by the carriage and clothes, this guy isn't easy to deal with. The knight then greets him, saying that since he's interested in the boy, he can take him. He grabs the kid's head, saying he's lucky to have been figured by the Baron. But in his ear, he says that maybe he's unlucky now because he's going to become a noble's toy. He steps on the kid's head, telling him to thank the Baron right away. Gao Yi is kind of confused about what to do, and suddenly he slaps the guard across the face, saying the boy already belongs to him. The soldiers and peasants are incredulous. Now the boy being saved understands what happened. Gao Yi asks the knight how he dares to step on his things with those dirty feet. The knight apologizes, saying it was unintentional. Gao Yi then puts his hand on Emma's waist. He pulls her close and asks the knight if he's staring at his woman. Gao Yi looks at Emma and tells her to cling to him. She obeys and clings to his arm. Gao Yi then asks the knight how many times he looked at his woman. The knight says only once. Gao Yi smiles and asks the people in the city how many times he really looked. People whisper to each other. They start saying it was 5, 10, 99 times, 100 times. The knight is somewhat confused, not knowing what will happen to him. Gao Yi says 100 times was too much, but 99 seems right. The knight says he belongs to the count, but Gao Yi says if the count knew he didn't respect etiquette, he'd also want punishment. But obviously he won't dirty his hands. So he throws a bunch of silver coins to everyone and says anyone who slaps him gets one. With that, everyone starts running towards the platform. As Gao Yi leaves, he says it's time for those who collect taxes to suffer a little, while thinking that this scene was perfect for getting the attention of that count. From the top of the castle, a spy who doesn't attract any attention watches everything. Back at the mansion, Gao Yi brought the sacrificial boy. Sitting in the chair, he announces that now that he saved him, he owns his life. The boy screams that he wasn't saved and doesn't want to become a noble's toy. Gao Yi says he doesn't want him for that, especially since he paid 99 coins. What he wants is his body and mind. Trembling, the boy asks what he wants to do with that. Gao Yi warns that now what he wants most is to hire him as an employee. The boy is shocked and Gao Yi shouts that he's decided he wants to rebuild the G group in this other world. And this boy will be his first great employee. The best part is that there are no child labor rules in this place. He talks like a true capitalist. But the first step to being his employee is to take a bath. With that, Emma already takes the boy away, who wants to know what this employee business is and how he knows she's a woman. Gao Yi wonders why he didn't call Emma his first employee. And a little later, she comes out of the bathroom. He strokes her face asking if it still hurts. She says no, Emma took care of her. Gao Yi then asks her name, and she says it's Cattails. He asks if she's hungry and hands her a cake to eat. She doesn't really know what it is, but Emma wants to steal it, so she takes a strawberry and eats it. Tears stream down her face. Gao Yi asks if it was that delicious. She says it's so good that it doesn't even deserve to be eaten by her, but she thanks him. Gao Yi says she made a mistake, leaving her somewhat confused, and he warns her that it's not for free. He turns to Emma and tells her to stop eating. Gao Yi then tells her she'll have to answer some questions about the count, and she'll even earn a silver coin. She says it's okay, she'll tell everything about that trash. 389 questions later, he's already wanting to know even the count's fetishes, but Cattails doesn't know what else to answer. He closes the book, saying it's okay then, he's learned almost everything he needs. Emma asks why he needs to learn this, and he shows her that he received an invitation to visit the count delivered by the hotel owner. Then he puts on his coat and tells Emma to take care of the first maid. Suddenly, Emma grabs him, she stops for a second, and says she wants to go with him too. Gao Yi says she wasn't invited, so she'll have to stay here and be obedient. She says she can't let that happen since it's her mission as a sacred guide. Besides, this lord seems to be a villain, and he knows nothing about weapons, fighting, or magic. What will she do if he ends up dying because of that count? Gao Yi smiles, pets him gently, and assures her she doesn't need to worry because he won't die. With that, he releases her hands and leaves. In front of the hotel, a carriage awaits him. Passing by the owner, who warns him not to visit the count as it's extremely dangerous, Gao Yi asks why she doesn't think he's actually more dangerous than the count. And with that, the carriage departs. She remembers when he whispered in her ear that unknown dangers are the deadliest. Feeling embarrassed, she admits she's becoming obsessed with the boy. Gao Yi says the mix of brutality, blood, and so many unknown things makes it very exciting. After a long journey by carriage, passing through the thicket, he finds someone hooded waiting for him. Obviously, the coat covers everything except that, and she instructs him to board the boat. With that, they canoe toward the count's castle. Gao Yi thinks the silence during the journey is terrifying. A little while later, he's inside the castle. Noticing the guards, they seem very diligent. The person who accompanied him tells him to wait in that room for a while. While he closes his eyes and revises his plans, he feels something strange and begins to wonder what's happening. His vision blurs when he sees someone lit incense in that room. When he opens his eyes, he sees a girl with fins and purple hair. She's using the strongest muscle in her body to violently attack him. Suddenly, the count appears behind him and says these mermaids have below zero blood, yet strangely, they don't freeze. Because of this, even in a hot pool, they don't warm up. The count explains that this mix of cold and heat is the best feeling. Gao Yi turns and asks if he's the so-called Count Murtaugh. Murtaugh asks if he's the Gordon who sells swords to help the poor, or if he's the guy who spends 2,500 coins on a suit. Or better yet, if he's the guy who prevented his soldiers from collecting taxes from the people. Gao Yi says he's both and neither. And then he says he's just a simple noble who wants the Count's help to regain his power. Everything that happened before that was just a performance to get the Count's attention. The Count says he's more interesting than he thought. What kind of help does he want? Gao Yi smiles, thinking the Count fell perfectly into his trap. And then he says he wants an army to help kill his uncle. The Count says it sounds interesting and asks him to explain more about this uncle. Gao Yi says he's the eldest son of the Count of the city of Tongcheng. His father worked with sea routes, but once they encountered a great storm and sank. They were at sea for 7 days and 7 nights until they finally found an island. He was devastated because he had lost all his boats, but that day he realized something. The island they had landed on was surrounded by golden sand. He used that gold to build the city of Tongcheng on what was then called Golden Island. But good things don't last forever. His uncle, who had always invited his father, finally revealed his intentions and poisoned him. Moreover, he stole his mother. To survive, he had to flee like a stray dog. And since that day, he swore he would survive and take everything back. And that's why he's here to ask for the Lord's help. Gao Yi is confident this is a story you can believe, and the temptation of the gold from the Golden Island will make the Count want to participate in it. He's sure this has at least moved the Count in some way. The Count approaches and says his story makes people cry and asks him to stand up. Gao Yi is confident, thinking this Count is more innocent than he expected. But the Count pulls a blade from his back and plunges it into his collarbone. He falls back into the pool, wondering how he could deceive him. The Count asks if he knows why he was attacked. Gao Yi pleads with him to please tell him why he suffered this. The Count says he arrived there with a blade, which shows he already had some bad intentions. But if he's here to ask for something, he should bow his tail between his legs when addressing him. Besides, he hates it when people play smart in front of him. Gao Yi doesn't understand how this guy knows he's lying if he has no information about him in this world. But the Count reveals that he didn't like how Gao Yi acted but liked the story he told. Gao Yi asks what he means by that while realizing the Count was really deceived by the temptation of the Golden Island. The Count hands him a cup, telling him to drink, and it will relieve the pain. Gao Yi is afraid that it might have a truth detection drug, but it will be difficult to deceive the Count, who is now asking him why he's not drinking. Gao Yi turns and says that from now on he will follow the Count's orders. Facing the cup, he knows he has no choice but to drink it all. The Count claps, saying he's very brave. He feels something strange, and the Count warns that this wine is made with the blood of the red viper. Immediately after drinking it, his body will heat up, and he will feel like he's burning from the inside out. All of his pores will open, and he will become extremely hot. And Gao Yi suffers so much pain. The Count leaves, saying he will suffer a lot. Gao Yi tries to resist, but he's not managing. The Count gives the final warning that they don't let the prey escape until they've struck it to death. Gao Yi realizes that because of the excess of sensations, he's not able to formulate a proper plan. He says he's trying to resist like a man, but suddenly, she covers his mouth, telling him to be quiet, and warns that if he kills the Count, they will be his. He finds it strange that she said something like that out of nowhere, but he tells her not to talk nonsense. Suddenly, something is beside his head. The mermaids are threatening him, and now the fun is over. The red-haired one asks if he thinks they're joking, while Gao Yi wonders if it's some kind of trap from the Lord. Trying to change the subject, he asks why they stopped so suddenly. She then touches his face and warns that because of skin-to-skin contact, she can understand very well what he thinks. Hero of benevolence from another world named Gao Yi. He is startled, besides him and Emma. No one else in this world knows these details. The mermaid says he doesn't need to try so hard to understand, and says that royal family mermaids can read minds, and the condition for this to happen is to cause extreme pain to the person. Gao Yi says that since she knows everything, they can be honest with each other. He has no way to kill the Count right now, as she must know that, and she, who is stronger than him, should be able to. But if she's asking, there are 2 possibilities. The first is that all this is just a test from the Count, and if he fails, he will end up dead. But if that were the case, she could just tell the Count at that moment, and he would already be dead. This means that for some reason she can't do that and wants him to cooperate. At first, she tried to use beauty to make it happen, but failed. Now she's trying to use mind reading to force him to do it again. Gao Yi says he realizes he has some value to them, and this atmosphere here is very tense. They need to relax a bit. He gets up and goes to the corner of the pool and tells them to reveal the true purpose. The mermaid seems taken aback and says that he really is the only one who can cause changes, and warns that after she became one with him, she was able to see all the moments of happiness and sadness in him. She saw that he was obsessed with money and reached where no one else could, and yet resisted temptations. She then stands up and says she knows very well that behind all that money deep in his heart, she can feel kindness. Gao Yi asks what she really wants. She says it's strange for him to be so smart and still not know. She touches his nose and warns that what she wants is him. Gao Yi awkwardly says he's not for sale and asks if there's nothing else she wants. She says he's the first man she's caused so much pain to and he'll be the last. Gao Yi asks if she's never hurt the Count, and she reveals that the Count never interacts with non-human creatures, and he had never told them to test anyone. For him to have asked that of her means that he values him quite a bit. Gao Yi seems excited by this news. She then advises him to go back to the Count and tell him that they tried to seduce him to kill the Count. This would be the final test of loyalty. Gao Yi asks if she's sure. This will be dangerous for her. She says he's really very kind, but he doesn't need to worry because she still wants to put their hair in this world. Gao Yi thinks that this world here is difficult to survive in, dresses and asks how they will get in touch later. She says he doesn't need to worry, they will be there when he needs them just as he appeared when they needed him. And she warns that her name is Xiao, and says it's good for him to remember the woman who hurt him a lot. Gao Yi leaves, saying he won't be able to forget even if he wanted to. The blonde mermaid asks if it's really worth trusting him considering the risks. Xiao says she doesn't need to worry because she saw in his memories how competent he is. He's someone who can do everything for them that others can't. From now on, he is their master, and they must be ready to die for him. And the first bloodline of Lord Gao, she has to bring into this world. Gao Ye is then taken to the Count, who asks him what he thought of their service, if he would like a second time. Gao Ye hesitates, and the Count asks for an answer. Gao Yi says it was very satisfactory, really an incredible experience, but there's something he's not sure if he should say or not. The Count tells him not to hesitate and to say it. Gao Yi then reveals that they tried to seduce him to kill the Count. The Count seems surprised. Suddenly, Gao Yi runs to him and kneels, saying that from now on he swears loyalty to him. Even when those mermaids were beating him with all the world's malice, he managed to survive and bring the truth. The Count puts the cup on the table and smilingly asks what he will gain from their relationship, and hearing that makes Gao Yi smile. Want to see a part 2? Activate that cheeky little bell, and I'm out.